Sometimes the silence between you and this person feels so unusual, so heavy, that it almost seems like words are being spoken without a sound. And if you clicked on this, there may be a reason. Because whether you admit it or not, somewhere deep inside, you have been feeling something different, as if this person has been trying to reach you emotionally, even though they have not spoken a single word out loud. What you are about to hear may explain exactly why. There are 3 messages coming from this person's heart, 3 truths they may never say directly to your face, and the second one may completely change the way you see everything between you. The first message is this: they think about you far more than you realize. Not once in a while, not casually, but much more deeply than they are willing to admit, even to themselves. Part of you may question this idea. You may wonder, if that is true, then why are they distant? Why are they silent? Why have they not reached out? But that question itself reveals something important. Most people believe that love always creates movement. They assume that if someone feels deeply, they will naturally move closer. But human psychology is not always that simple. Sometimes deep emotions create closeness, and sometimes they create distance. When someone feels emotionally overwhelmed by a connection they cannot fully control, stepping back becomes their way of coping. They create distance, not because nothing is there, but because too much is there. They become quieter, not because they stopped caring, but because caring begins to feel heavy. It starts to feel dangerous to their emotional balance, dangerous to the identity they built, and dangerous to the emotional walls they spent years creating. If this person carries old wounds connected to vulnerability, abandonment, rejection, or emotional dependence, then your presence may awaken all of those feelings at once. So their silence may not be emptiness at all. It may simply be emotional overload. Some people express love easily, while others have a nervous system that interprets emotional closeness as losing control. They feel attachment and fear at the very same time. They want connection, yet they also feel the need to run away from it. This contradiction can be deeply confusing for the person on the receiving end, especially someone like you, someone emotionally aware enough to sense when something deeper exists beneath the surface. And this is where everything becomes even more complicated, because you are not imagining it. You are not being overly sensitive. You are not creating meaning where there is none. If you have repeatedly felt their presence in your thoughts, if you keep sensing emotional waves from them during quiet moments, if you feel there is something unfinished between you, there may be a reason. Carl Jung spoke about how the unconscious mind communicates through symbols, projections, emotional patterns, and repeated impressions. Sometimes what remains unspoken becomes louder than spoken words. Maybe you suddenly think about them without any clear reason. A memory appears out of nowhere. You feel their presence late at night. Their image enters your mind just when you were trying not to think about them, and you ask yourself, why now? But perhaps the deeper question is, what is happening inside them that keeps drawing my attention back? Because emotional bonds do not always disappear just because communication stops. Sometimes silence does not erase a connection. Instead, it quietly preserves its intensity. This brings us deeper into the first message. They may be carrying an inner battle that you cannot see. On the outside, they may appear calm, distant, or even uninterested. But inside, they may be replaying your conversations and moments together far more often than you realize. Certain words you spoke may still echo in their mind. Certain memories may still feel emotionally alive. Something about you may have reached a part of them they had hidden for years. And that is exactly what frightened them, because genuine connection does not only bring comfort, it also exposes everything that remains unresolved. Real emotional connection is not always easy, especially for people who survived by protecting themselves emotionally. When someone like that meets a person who can see beyond their mask, something unusual happens inside them. They feel relief and fear at the same time. Relief because someone finally sees them without judgment. Fear because they can no longer hide in the same way. If you naturally notice emotional truth in people, this person may have felt emotionally exposed around you without fully understanding why. But that is not the only reason their silence feels so powerful. Something even deeper is happening beneath the surface. Sometimes a person does not pull away because they do not care. They pull away because caring forces them to face who they are becoming in your presence. You may have become a mirror for them, and mirrors are not always comfortable. They reveal longing, regret, emotional immaturity, unhealed wounds, and the version of themselves they tried to leave behind. In Jungian psychology, this is often called shadow activation, the meeting of hidden parts of the self that were buried because they once felt unsafe to experience. Maybe your kindness reminded them how emotionally closed they had become. Maybe your honesty showed them how much they had been pretending to be strong while secretly feeling lonely. Maybe your emotional depth exposed their habit of keeping people at a distance. Whatever the exact reason, something inside them shifted because of you. And once someone begins to see their own emotional truth, pretending everything is fine becomes much harder. This leads to the deeper part of the first message, something painful but important. They miss you. Not always in the obvious way people imagine. Missing someone does not always mean crying or reaching out. Sometimes it appears as restlessness, frustration, emotional distraction, or a feeling of emptiness that is difficult to explain. They may try to keep themselves constantly busy because quiet moments bring thoughts of you back into their mind. They may throw themselves into work, daily routines, or conversations with other people, yet something still feels unfinished inside them. Here is the paradox. The more they miss you, the more they may fight those feelings, because missing someone creates vulnerability, and vulnerability threatens their sense of control. So instead of moving closer, they may become even more distant, even quieter, and even more emotionally confusing. From your side, this inconsistency can hurt deeply because an unclear connection often feels heavier than having no connection at all. A clear ending may be painful, but emotional uncertainty can stay in the mind for a very long time, especially when your intuition keeps telling you that something more exists beneath the surface. This brings us to the second message, the one that may surprise you. If the first message was about hidden longing, then the second message is about the truth behind their behavior, and it is stronger than you might expect. The second message is this. They are afraid of how much influence you have over their emotional world, not influence in a controlling or manipulative way. Something much deeper than that. You affect them emotionally in ways they cannot easily understand or regulate. Your absence changes their emotional state. Your presence shifts their inner balance. Your words stay in their thoughts much longer than they expect. That can feel overwhelming for someone who built their identity around emotional independence, self-control, and never needing anyone too much. Then suddenly, someone enters their life and those emotional defenses begin to weaken. They may start checking their phone more often than before. They may experience anticipation and disappointment more intensely. They may notice themselves becoming emotionally dependent in ways they never expected. If they spent years avoiding emotional surrender, then you may represent exactly what they fear most, being deeply affected, being changed, and being emotionally moved in ways they cannot control. The difficult part is that they may also become frustrated with themselves for caring this much. They may resist their own feelings because those emotions challenge their sense of stability. This is why their behavior can seem so mixed. One moment they appear warm and open. The next moment they become quiet and distant. It feels confusing because we naturally expect actions to match emotions. But for emotionally conflicted people, behavior often reflects self-protection rather than emotional truth. Their defenses tell them to step away. Their heart quietly tells them to stay. There is an ongoing inner conflict inside this person. One part insists they do not need you. Another part quietly admits that they already do. Living with this emotional conflict becomes exhausting over time. Carl Jung believed that what we resist within ourselves does not disappear. Instead, it often grows stronger. The more someone pushes away genuine emotions, the more those emotions continue working beneath the surface of the unconscious mind. Because of this, even if someone avoids you in everyday life, they may still feel deeply connected to you emotionally. Physical distance does not always break an emotional bond. Sometimes resistance can make the attachment feel even stronger. Something else may also be happening, and if this reflects your situation, you may have already sensed it. This person may be testing you without fully realizing they are doing it. They may be quietly observing whether you will continue chasing after them. This is not always a conscious choice. Sometimes it is simply an unconscious attempt to measure emotional safety. They want reassurance that you will not leave, while at the same time fearing what it would mean if you truly stayed. That inner contradiction can keep them trapped between reaching out and pulling away, leaving both of you caught in a silence that says far more than words ever could. Often, it comes from fear. Fear of being abandoned, but also fear of becoming too emotionally close. So they create distance and quietly watch your reaction. Will you leave? Will you fight for them? Will you keep proving your feelings again and again? Will you become emotionally overwhelmed? Will you still stay if they become difficult or distant? On the surface, this behavior can seem cold or detached, but underneath, it is often shaped by emotional wounds that existed long before you entered their life. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it can help explain the pattern. If you have been giving too much, waiting too long, or constantly explaining your feelings, something inside you may have changed recently. Maybe you became quieter. Maybe you stopped chasing. Maybe you started protecting your own emotional energy. Maybe, for the first time, you stepped back emotionally. And if that happened, something also changed inside them. They can no longer depend on your constant emotional availability. Now they feel uncertainty. Now they feel the possibility of loss. Now they are experiencing the same emotional confusion that you may have carried for a long time. This moment can feel like a turning point in the connection. The moment you stop chasing emotionally may be the very moment they finally feel your absence. When someone is always available, the other person can delay emotional responsibility. They can take their time. They can avoid giving clear answers. They can remain passive. But when your energy changes, when your attention is no longer guaranteed, something much deeper begins to awaken inside them. Fear starts to appear. Regret slowly begins to grow. A new sense of urgency starts to develop, and the emotional balance between both of you begins to shift. They may start asking themselves whether you are finally done, whether you are moving forward, whether they have already lost you, whether there will ever be another chance. But beneath all of this is an even deeper fear. Their greatest fear may not simply be losing you. It may be the fear of what happens if they fully allow themselves to love you. Because real love changes a person's identity. It breaks emotional defenses. It asks for honesty. It requires surrender. And surrender can feel terrifying to the ego. That is why some people pull away exactly when their feelings become real. Not because love is weak, but because it is powerful enough to challenge the version of themselves they created for protection. This person may be standing at that emotional crossroads right now. One part of them wants to move closer. Another part wants to disappear. One part wants to tell you everything. Another part wants to keep suppressing it all. At the same time, there is another process happening beneath this inner conflict, a process that may decide which side eventually becomes stronger. Before that becomes clear, there is one more psychological shift happening inside them that deserves attention. Something they have been trying to ignore is becoming harder to suppress. When emotions are pushed down for too long, the mind eventually becomes tired of carrying that weight. The body, the subconscious, and the emotions begin pushing back against denial. What they tried to ignore keeps returning. What they avoided refuses to disappear. What they never wanted to face now demands their attention. This is where a deeper realization begins. They can no longer fully convince themselves that this connection means nothing. For a long time, they may have tried to explain it away. They may have told themselves it was only temporary. They may have reduced its importance in their own mind. They may have called it attraction, curiosity, coincidence, loneliness, or simply a passing phase. Anything except what it truly felt like. Because the moment you give something a name, it becomes real. And once it becomes real, it begins asking something from you. It asks for honesty. It asks for responsibility. It asks for courage. And courage is often where many people struggle the most. Many people find emotional openness extremely difficult, especially if they learned early in life that vulnerability leads to pain. Some build their entire emotional survival around control, distance, and self-protection. So when deep feelings appear, everything inside them feels shaken. They never expected you to remain present in their inner world for this long. They never expected your emotional presence to continue even after silence and distance. They never imagined that even while trying to move forward or distract themselves, something about you would still remain alive inside their thoughts and emotions. That is the nature of strong emotional bonds. They do not always follow logic. A person cannot simply decide to stop feeling something that truly mattered. The mind cannot completely erase what the heart has already accepted. Recently, this may have become even clearer for them. Your absence is no longer bringing peace. Instead, it is creating emotional discomfort. At first, distance may have felt like relief. It may have given them space to breathe. It may have made them feel more in control. They may have believed that time and distractions would slowly weaken their emotions. They may have expected everything to fade naturally. But instead of fading, the emotional connection may have become even stronger inside them. Instead of becoming lighter, it may have grown heavier. Instead of feeling free, they may now feel an increasing sense of emptiness. This changes everything. Denial only works while someone believes avoidance will eventually solve the emotional struggle. Once avoidance stops working, truth becomes much harder to escape. Now, they may find themselves noticing your absence during the simplest moments of everyday life. Quiet evenings, short breaks during the day, peaceful moments when distractions disappear. In those quiet spaces, thoughts of you begin returning again. They may replay old conversations. They may remember little details they believed they had forgotten. They may wonder what you are feeling now. They may wonder whether you still think about them. They may quietly ask themselves whether they still matter to you. Something very important often happens at this stage. A person frequently realizes the true value of someone, not while that person is constantly giving love, but when that emotional presence is no longer guaranteed. Not because love is a game, but because absence removes emotional numbness. It reveals what was already there all along. When warmth is always available, people can sometimes take it for granted without realizing it. But when that warmth is no longer there in the same way, they begin to notice the emotional difference much more clearly. They begin to feel what had silently supported them. They begin to recognize how meaningful the connection truly was. Now, they understand something they may never admit easily. Your presence mattered far more than they ever expressed. Your energy touched them much more deeply than they allowed themselves to admit. Losing this connection would never feel neutral to them. It would leave a real emotional wound. Yet even with this realization, hesitation still remains. Understanding something emotionally is not the same as finding the courage to act on it. Feeling the truth is different from following the truth. This is the difficult middle stage where emotion and fear exist together. One part of them is exhausted from carrying everything in silence. Another part is afraid of what might happen if they finally let go of control. One inner voice tells them to reach out and stop hiding. Another tells them to stay guarded and protect themselves from rejection. If shame or guilt has become part of the situation, the inner conflict becomes even stronger. Then another fear quietly appears. What if it is already too late? What if you have grown tired? What if trust has already been broken? What if their silence caused damage that cannot be repaired? What if they missed the opportunity they were given? Regret often grows quietly. It rarely arrives with loud emotions. Sometimes it appears as a heavy feeling in the chest. Sometimes it returns as repeated thoughts late at night. Sometimes it becomes a deep awareness that something meaningful was lost because fear kept winning over honesty. Many people eventually recover from heartbreak, but what can be even harder to live with is regret. The painful realization that love was present, yet fear caused them to walk away from it. From a psychological perspective, real growth often begins when emotional masks become too exhausting to keep wearing. when pretending no longer feels possible, when avoidance no longer provides relief, when a person becomes tired of fighting their own heart. Something inside this person may be reaching that point now, tired of resisting, tired of pretending nothing matters, tired of carrying emotions in silence, tired of living with an inner conflict that never completely disappears. This does not mean everything is suddenly solved, but it does suggest that something is moving inside them. Something is slowly changing. Something is becoming softer. If you have been noticing stronger emotions or unexpected intuitive feelings lately, it may not feel random to you. It may simply reflect your growing awareness of changes already taking place beneath the surface of this connection. Sometimes, before anything changes outwardly, something has already begun changing within. Real change does not always begin with words. Often, it starts quietly, in ways that cannot immediately be explained. Feelings begin to shift before actions do. The heart may already be changing long before the mind fully understands what is happening. That is why emotionally sensitive or highly intuitive people sometimes notice changes early. They may not have clear evidence, but they sense that something feels different. There may be an unexplained restlessness. There may be dreams that feel unusually vivid or emotionally powerful. There may be sudden waves of emotion that appear without any obvious reason. There may also be repeated thoughts about one specific person, even when nothing in daily life has reminded them of that individual. Even so, intuition should always be balanced with reality. Feelings can offer valuable insight, but they should not replace honest communication, clear actions, or healthy boundaries. Real emotional understanding grows strongest when both intuition and reality are allowed to work together instead of competing with one another.